Welcome to Recently Logged, where this week we're living out Martin Scorsese's true dream and burning the entire film archive. You ever think about that this movie is set in France?
In France.
It's about a French director, and yet everyone in the movie is pretty much British. Save for like one guy.
Generic British.
Why are they all British? What's up with that?
I don't know. I think I was looking through one of the top reviews was like, where are the French people in the movie?
Oh, it's an automatic loss of a star. 0 French people.
Set in Paris. Like, where are the French people? We don't know.
Ratatouille gets away with it because it's a rat.
It's a rat. What are they going to do? But hello, everyone.
Hi.
I'm Robbie.
And I'm Micah.
And together we talk about the movies.
The movies.
But this week, specifically one movie.
Ooh.
From a specific director.
Ooh.
Who you may or may not be familiar with.
Ooh.
Who happened to direct, like, a lot of the biggest movies ever.
Wow.
And is largely regarded as one of the best directors ever.
He's a hack and I hate him already.
He's a hack and this movie is the proof. But yes, we're talking about this week Martin Scorsese's Hugo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting one because we watched it when it came out.
It's the only one I've seen in a theater, right?
Chillins.
I think.
Yeah.
I don't remember if we watched it in the theater or not.
We watched it in the theater.
Yeah.
We watched it as chillins, and neither of us really liked it to memory.
I didn't know who Martin Scorsese was.
I mean, yeah, obviously
or
we didn't
Georges
know who Martin
Méliès
Scorsese or Georges Méliès or anything like that. Actually, we had read the book though.
Yeah,
it was at our library. Weird book.
Cool book.
Yeah. Wow, we're just in sync today apparently.
Weird book. But yes.
So Hugo. then we watched it again, probably in like 2015 or something, somewhere in there.
2014.
Again, when we weren't really
like
super into film.
No.
And I also remember not liking it that much.
I remember being kind of put off by it as like a really young kid, and then just kind of bored by it on my second watch.
Yeah. So now I've watched a bunch of Scorsese movies, almost all of them. I'm doing a little thing where I'm trying to watch all of his feature length.
Seen a lot more than I have.
Narrative films, and I think I'm like 2 away from all of them.
Pretty cool.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to rewatch this one because it was really low on my ranking, and everyone was like, "Oh, what's it doing down there?" And
Hugo,
I'm like, "Oh, I haven't seen it since I was a kid." So that's what like inspired us to do this. Mm-hmm. And Robbie bought it on Blu-ray.
Your big watch through. I bought it for like $3 on Blu-ray.
Which with that means I had just watched like a day before The Last Temptation of Christ. Thinking very different flavors of Scorsese.
Kinds of Scorsese movies, yeah. It's funny. Yossi, a good friend of the podcast, Yossi Sloan, you should go watch one of his short films.
Indeed.
They're quite good.
Yeah.
But he was on the Princess Bride episode. He'd messaged me when he found out we were doing Hugo on the podcast. It's self-proclaimed like his favorite Scorsese movie. He's like, Arrow's about to do like a 3D 4K release of Hugo on air, like through Arrow, and I'm like, what? And it's like a week away from today.
A week away.
It's like a couple days.
Week away.
Well, I think actually by the time the episode comes out, it'll be like 1 day away from its release.
Wow. So I guess go buy Hugo in 4K.
Go buy Hugo in 4K. It looks very cool.
But yeah, that was just kind of some backstory. But let's get into some facts about Hugo. Things you need to know.
Let's do it.
All right, so again, we're talking about Hugo, which is a 2011 film. It is rated PG. It is 2 hours and 6 minutes. The little IMDb description is, in 1931 Paris, an orphan living in the walls of a train station gets wrapped up in a mystery involving his late father and an automaton.
Automaton, whoa. Ooh. Scary.
Ooh. The cast features Asa Butterfield, Chloe Grace Moretz, Christopher Lee, Ben Kingsley, Sacha Cohen, Ray Winstone, Emily Mortimer.
She's great.
Helen McCrory.
Yeah.
And others, including Richard Griffiths, which I wanted to shout out.
We've said his name many times. I love
him. He's the best. Also, Jude Law's randomly here.
Yeah, Jude Law.
Very odd. It's directed by Martin Scorsese.
Yep.
if I can pull this up correctly, because it's doing the whole
IMDb thing where it's terrible.
Screenplay by John Logan,
Yes.
and it's based on the book The Invention of Hugo Cabret by Brian Selznick.
Yeah.
Brian Selznick.
You know, coincidentally, Yossi also has a signed copy of The Invention of Hugo Cabret.
I mean, it's a really cool book.
It is a very cool book.
Like I would almost recommend reading the book more than watching the movie. But it won 5 Oscars. Whew. It won Best Achievement in Cinematography, Best Achievement in Sound Mixing, Best Achievement in Sound Editing, Best Achievement in Visual Effects, Best Achievement in Art Direction, and was nominated for Best Picture, Best Direction, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Film Editing, Best Costume Design, and Best Original Score.
Yeah, no, the critics love. I think this
is easily like the most Oscar-winning movie of Scorsese's,
which is hilarious to think about.
I think the second most is like The Departed, which is very, very goofy to think about. But yeah. Anything else you want to mention, Remy?
I think it's worth mentioning, if we're going to bring up all of its critical successes, it's worth mentioning that it was a bit of a box office bomb back when it released. But
we were out there.
We were in the streets.
We were... interesting. According to Letterboxd, Brian Selznick is also credited on the screenplay, not just on...
I feel like I was watching the special features. I feel like I remember him, like, at least collaborating or, like, giving notes or something on the screenplay. I don't think he didn't write it, but I think he was like a consultant for it.
Yeah, of course.
It wasn't produced like without him, essentially.
Yeah, of course, Thelma Schoonmaker is editor.
She's great.
Robert Richardson did the cinematography. That's Tarantino's main cinematographer.
Goodness, dude.
And also like late Scorsese. Any of his like digital movies are typically shot by him.
Apparently he had never done 3D until Hugo.
Yeah, which Scorsese had never done 3D either. He actually went to like James Cameron and whatever, I forget the other guy's name. They have like a little 3D, their little like effects foundation.
Yeah.
And he did a little boot camp.
Which is very funny to me.
Score, Howard Shore.
Howard Shore.
Very Howard Shore score.
Very Howard Shore score, yes.
And lots of other very talented people worked on this movie.
Yeah. Pretty towering technical achievement in filmmaking, if you ask me. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into what we actually thought of Hugo.
Let's do it. All right, so Robbie, what did you personally think of Hugo? Directed by Martin Scorsese.
Wow. I don't know. I generally really like it. I think I really admire it, even more so than like having a personal connection to it, which has really been my biggest critique of it, like this time around.
Yeah.
Where like I really love what it's doing, like on a conceptual level and like a visual level, and like it's a technically really well made movie, and I love the cast and the score and everything. I just have a hard time actually connecting with it like on a personal note, and being invested in all of the beats that it lays out. But I think generally I really like it and I really admire it, and I'm really glad it got made. Because honestly, The Invention of Hugo Cabret is a really interesting novel, and if there was ever going to be an adaptation of it that I enjoyed and that I thought had a lot of value, it would be this one.
Yeah, right.
You know, Scorsese's like the perfect guy to make a story about something he cares so much about. In one of the special features on the Blu-ray for this, I think it was like the film editor or one of the producers or something, they're like, if there was one man on earth who had like a full knowledge of film history, it would be Martin Scorsese.
Right. And it's so funny to see like Scorsese be able to make a movie about like his other big thing besides making movies, which is preserving movies.
Like film preservation.
That's like his big thing, and he got to do a movie kind of about film preservation.
He went on this whole like almost rant about like how excited he was when he found out like about Millier's films being preserved, and like they keep discovering new ones in different archives and everything. Because I think the count's up to like 200 something of Méliès's films now that have been recovered.
That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, that's insane. But yeah, Hugo, great movie. I just have a little bit of a hard time connecting with it on a fuller like level like I want to. That's the only thing holding it back from me being like, yeah, it's like the best movie ever. Because honestly, it's technically good enough that that could be the case if I did, get more out of it on an emotional and personal level.
Yeah. And what did you rate it?
I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5.
Nice. Yeah, I really agree in a lot of ways, like I know so many people, like two people who I know at least one of them wanted a shout out on the podcast.
Yeah.
But Kaylor, who was just recently on the podcast with our Rango episode, this is one of his favorites.
Understandably, I could see this being a favorite.
And also Yossi, it's one of his favorite movies. Yossi. Yeah, and like both of them, when I hear them like describe it in their reviews and stuff for it, like especially Yossi, he talks about like it very much like connecting him to like and showing him a love of cinema at a young age. Yeah, and that didn't do it for me. Like that did not happen for me at a young age.
Yeah, exactly.
And it still didn't really connect with me in that way now. Like watching the movie, it's a technical marvel. The 3D is super impressive, and the way they incorporated it without being a 3D, let me put on my 3D glasses movie.
They're not like throwing stuff at the camera like that kind of 3D.
Yeah. And it's a very technically impressive, unique, and fun movie. It's really fun to see Scorsese do kind of a kid's movie and kind of go for a lot more comedic and light beats.
Yeah, I love all the small like plot lines and comedic threads and everything that are in this.
But I just don't connect much personally to its message about movies. Like I love movie production, and I love like kind of getting to romanticize the production of art and the creation of especially early cinema.
Yeah.
And even I love George Méliès's work. They're not like my favorite personal films to watch, but they're endlessly impressive and engaging.
The more of his stuff that I've watched, the more like I grow to appreciate it. Because I didn't love Trip to the Moon when I saw it.
I appreciate his stuff so much. It's just they're just not my personal favorite thing, but they're so impressive. They are crazy, and I love like theoretically like being able to see a movie that tries to capture some of like the production that went into those movies sounds like the coolest thing in the world. Sounds like my kind of movie. But I feel like this movie is kind of just going different directions with it, and I feel like the Hugo stuff doesn't fully work with the film stuff.
Well, and a lot of the Georges Méliès stuff is relegated to a flashback. Like a really long flashback, but a flashback nonetheless. So it doesn't feel, I don't know, maybe I'm just spitballing, but maybe that's why it doesn't feel quite as gratifying as you want it to.
Yeah. Though I also gave the movie a 4 out of 5.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty fair rating for it. If I did half stars, it might be a 4.5, but I don't know. I feel like 4 is a pretty fair rating for it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Given the way I feel about it. Obviously, technically, there's not too much I would change here. Like on a text level, I think it's a really smart screenplay. I think the way it ties all of its emotional threads into a really solid payoff at the end is really impressive and really good. And I actually enjoy engaging with this a lot more than I enjoyed reading the book back when I read it as a kid. I feel so, I almost feel bad for like not loving it as much as other people do.
Right.
Like, cause I watched it like at the perfect age, I think, to see Hugo. Maybe a little older would have been better.
Yeah, I think I was like, I don't know. I was at a weird age when I was like still not fully like into like what art even really was.
Exactly.
Like I knew what like I was like, I don't know, I was probably like 10, 11, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably a little younger than that.
Yeah, a little younger than that.
So like I had like a good understanding of like what art was, but at the same time I wasn't engaging with the movie on the level that a lot of the text I feel is presented in this. Though it's done in a way that's supposed to be still very fun to engage with, even if you don't like engage with all of its themes.
Yeah, no, it and I really admire it because like in theory it's a really accessible and like enjoyable voyage into film history and everything. But like just speaking from experience, I didn't get anything out of it as a kid. I got scared at the automaton and was confused by all of the flashback stuff, and I was like, "What on earth?"
The scene where the kid he turns into the automaton, that freaked me out as a kid.
I had nightmares.
There's something
for weeks after that,
and I would still. And I feel mean for saying this, but I would still say watching it, it may be the 3D or something about this movie
what it was.
Is kind of just off-putting, even to me now.
Really?
Not even like it doesn't feel like you actually compared it to Paddington while we were watching it.
There's a lot of visual and like physical beat similarities to
Paddington is such like it heavily uses CGI.
Yeah.
It's a very digital looking movie. But
it uses that well.
I was about to say Paddington 2 has such a warmth to it, and there's such like a comfort and a joy I get while watching Paddington, and I never get that from this movie. This movie feels almost cold and distant, more so than I'd want it to.
Interesting, because on this time around, I actually thought it felt a lot warmer and more inviting than it used to.
I don't know. There's something that just doesn't. And again, the setting is something that totally sounds like it was made for me. Like even the story sounds like something.
In a train station.
Secret tunnel in a train station with a robot with a bunch of clocks and gears and like. I mean, I love Del Toro movies. What do you think I'm doing?
I was about to say this thing kind of looks like a Del Toro movie from like a color scheme and like grading.
Yeah, but there's just something about this movie, and it's hard to even put a word on that. Just doesn't fully click on a lot of the levels for me. It feels like mostly just disconnected pieces that are all really, really good, but don't come together into the kind of movie that feels like I want it to.
Interesting. I suppose we can actually like ask a question now, get into a bit more of a discussion.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask what you thought of the like ending epilogue thing that this movie has, where they present all of Georges' films like in a theater, and like he makes his big speech, and
like
everyone's there.
It's like the best part of the movie.
Yeah, I was about to say like my favorite scene in the movie. It's so sweet and moving, and it's got that shot where like the spotlight they start shifting the lens.
It's like if Babylon was good.
But yeah, what did you think of that scene?
Yeah, no, I think that scene is really, really fantastic. This like the filmmaking is obviously incredible, and they do a really, really great job in the editing of that to make it just a really powerful and punchy end. Yeah. But I feel like that also kind of pokes to, I guess, what I personally, because I feel like this is a me problem, not a movie problem. Okay. What I personally, because what I say about this disconnect, I feel is like just me not fully getting something when I watch the movie. And I feel like what this scene really points to is that feeling of like, I don't really see how this is really that much of like a found family for Hugo, or how much this really relates to Hugo or Hugo's journey or Hugo's dad. Like, yeah, it was like, this was the message from his dad. But like, I never engage with Hugo on this level of like creating dreams or art or works. Like Hugo, just I don't see the personal connection from Hugo to those themes running through. So you have this.
I mean, he has this whole monologue in the clock about like machines having their set purpose and everything.
Yeah, and like what was Hugo's purpose?
To fix things.
Yeah, and what does that have to do with like the films? I don't know. It just doesn't fully click for me.
Well, Georges, it very much presents him as a broken machine.
Yeah, he fixes Georges.
Yeah, exactly.
Méliès,
and he finally finds like his familial connection that he's been missing.
No, but I don't see that. I do not see that familial connection in the movie. I don't think that's presented in a way that makes me ever believe that like they really come together in that way. There's not a whole lot of bonding between Hugo and
That's
George.
True, yeah.
Or even Hugo and What's-Her-Face.
Yeah.
Like, I never felt... And like, that's part of that disconnect, that kind of cold feeling I get from the movie.
I get what you're saying,
is that the movie never feels like it can, like, settle on something. It almost is so digital that it feels like you're constantly at a distance from all of the characters, and they're not allowed to truly engage with each other like I want them to. Like you're constantly looking at them from this Hugo perspective of being far off. Even your little side characters with their little romance, like the inspector, like they're at a distance from me personally. And in Hugo kind of falls under that same thing where like obviously I see what they're going for in terms of, oh, he fixes things.
Yeah.
But I just don't get anything. I don't see the emotional connection between that, his father, finding a family, and the themes that they're going for art. They all just are kind of next to each other when I watch the movie.
It's interesting. I don't know. In my mind, like, his monologue in the clock and the final monologue really tied it all emotionally together a lot better than I expected it would. And it doesn't seem like that was the case.
Yeah, quite frankly, it didn't. Like,
Yeah.
you know, that monologue is all about like everything having a place and everything having a purpose. And he's like, maybe I found my purpose. But like, I feel like he just doesn't actively have that much that he does. Like, he does a lot emotionally, but I feel like that doesn't have actually not physically, like technically have much to do with the rest of the plot of the movie. It's just kind of happenstance that the rest of everything happens.
Interesting.
It's not directly Hugo driven outside of his desire to fix the automaton just because of his dad, which his dad doesn't have any direct connection to a lot of like art or anything, because we don't get much view of him other than that he like is really passionate about his clocks that we get in a brief flashback. So like you have this setup where Hugo has a really engaging and really powerful like emotional connection to this automaton and his father.
Yeah.
And I love all of that stuff. But then outside of that, I always feel like even on this most recent watch that a lot of the other things just are kind of happenstance that just he just so happened to find this guy, and just because of his pursuit of what his father sent, it just so happened to open up what George needed to see. It wasn't directly like Hugo, other than him being like, but what? But why? Excuse me, why? Let me poke and open. Like, he's not actually emotionally engaging with George outside of being like, there's this mystery, this thing I need to fix. This mystery box I need to open, this key I need to unlock.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It wasn't nearly as big of a like detractor for me when I was watching, but I think I do get what you're getting at.
Yeah, and I'm obviously like rambling on trying to put it into words because like it's just the sense that I get when watching the movie that not everything fully comes together. And I think that ending scene, to tie it back to what your question was in the first place, despite loving that scene and loving really all of like the Georges Méliès stuff, I think it's really great in the movie. Ben Kingsley does an amazing job.
I honestly can't believe Ben Kingsley just looks so much like him.
Right? He just looks so similar. But like, you know, Hugo's sitting there in the audience and I look at him and I'm like, wow, what's he doing here?
Wow.
What does he have to do with this? I don't know,
just like in my mind, like the automaton that he's very much equated with his father and like his need for a family. Because, you know, he just lives basically alone with the automaton the entire time.
He literally has a line that he's like, I thought if I could fix the automaton, it would make me not so lonely.
Exactly. But like, I think the fact that the automaton creates like a piece of artwork that points him to George is a really like it feels a lot more emotionally authentic than I expected it to. You know, like it feels like a good way to kind of send him off towards him.
Yeah, again.
But I do get what you're saying, because there's not much like connective tissue with a lot of them throughout the rest of the story.
For most of the movie, you see George is like, kid, you're annoying, and then he gets him to help in his shop, and you kind of get the sense that he like admires Hugo's work and his talent, and kind of has this under the surface, but that never really technically boils over into anything until Hugo is grabbed by the inspector, and then he comes in and he's like, he's my boy, he's my child, which didn't feel like yes, it's a big moment for him because he's been shown to be so cold, but at the same time you could tell through all of this coldness was just kind of a surface level thing, that he did genuinely care about people and even Hugo, but that's never put into an actual familial connection that we get to see on screen.
Yeah, and again, I don't think it's I wouldn't put it quite to the degree that you are, but yeah, I do see what you're saying. And that's really, like I said, the thing that's like kind of holding me back from just like totally loving this.
Yeah, because that's like, that's the movie. That's
Yeah.
what it's going for, is these tie through themes between like art and family and purpose. And creating that art as being like such a powerful purpose.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, it just doesn't connect personally with me to the character of Hugo.
That's fair. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's really kind of what held me back from loving it as a kid. It's not nearly as big of a problem for me now, just because there's so many other elements of it that really work for me, like a lot. But yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't know. Hugo's a very strange movie for me.
Yeah. It's very weird in general, and it's again, it's not even just weird among Scorsese's filmography, but even comparing it to something that's like tangentially similar, like Paddington, they're just so drastically different in everything that they're doing. Like, it's just I can't think of another movie that feels quite like, Hugo, except for like vaguely like a Paddington Polar Express mix, and oftentimes that feels like just a surface level aesthetic feeling similarity. Like, I feel like, you tied a Polar Express because I feel like a lot of the actual cinematography and stuff feels like Polar Express.
Visually, it is kind of similar to Polar Express.
A lot of use of its 3D and everything makes it feel very much like, a Zemeckis project.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. I was going to ask if you had a favorite scene or sequence, but I think you said that was your favorite scene.
I mean, it probably is. There's like probably, yeah, because then you get the monologue and you get the final shot of the automaton too, which is a great shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that has to be my favorite.
I was about to say, I do genuinely, like, one of my favorite scenes would definitely, like, genuinely be the Méliès flashback.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Oh my goodness, dude. The Méliès flashback sequence is like so good. When they were showing like the dragon on set and everything, I'm like, Scorsese must have been like just kicking his heels in glee, right. Doing all of this stuff.
I would love to see him work on the production of this, to be able to recreate like Méliès sets.
They were talking about it. They were like, we didn't have to do it like this accurately, but Scorsese really wanted to. Like, he just was loving it.
Of course. But yeah, like that part of the movie is where I think most of like the really like charm of the movie for me personally comes in.
It's so nice. It's such a sweet and like moving segment of the whole movie.
I was about to say, and I think
it's the thing that sticks out in my mind
does a really good job of tying you to that like creation of dreams purpose. Like, even the thing with like the film historian preserve guy, I love that character.
Yeah,
I connect with that character
so much
to the story more than I connect with Hugo.
Yeah.
Which is weird, because again, I think Hugo also has a really compelling thing, but I just, in my mind, it just separates that as like, oh, that's the side thing. Hugo is doing the automaton thing, and that kind of weirdly connects to the thingy thing.
That's the thing. The automaton plotline kind of wraps up by the halfway point. Yeah, essentially.
Again, and then Hugo's just kind of like, what's that all about? And that's his involvement in the second half of the movie.
In theory, he has a lot of emotional involvement in Georges and his family at this point.
Yeah, but he has emotional involvement just on the fact that this is still that mystery that his dad left him. So he is viewing that as like, this is something he
the way I
personally has to crack.
By the halfway point, you see his like empathy and interest in Georges' career after the film library, and like that kind of becomes like his new goal in the story, is to help Georges like remember how much joy and magic his films brought to everyone else. Like,
see, I don't see that as really tying through, because you go directly from the scene from the film library and the museum to them just being like, you want to meet him, and then you go to his house.
He fixes the automaton, and now he doesn't have another thing to fix at that point. But then it points him to Georges, and he starts to see the beauty.
No, he just wants to fix. He wants to fix Georges by finding out this mystery.
I don't know. know. It doesn't feel like that when I'm watching it. I don't know.
I don't know. That's again, this is probably a me problem, given that so many people like this movie.
Yeah.
But that is what it feels like to me. That this is just like another thing that just is kind of coincidentally next in his line of things. I never feel a really strong connection like that. Hugo feels a strong connection.
Yeah, I didn't.
George
I didn't
as a parent figure or anything.
Yeah, I didn't feel that, especially when I watched it when I was younger. But I definitely connected with it a lot more this time, which I was happy about.
I was about to say, I see them, like, again, you get scenes like them on the couch together where you could tell that, there has been growth between them and, like, respecting each other. Like, George respecting what Hugo does and Hugo respecting what George does, and both, like, having admiration for those crafts and purposes.
And, like, the mouse repair scene is really great.
But I just don't, that just doesn't, I don't know, something about that doesn't fully work for me in a way that I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense for the resolution of Hugo's entire story.
Yeah. No, I get that.
But yeah, sure. I think my favorite scene would probably, or sequence rather, would probably be the Millier flashback stuff.
That's fair. Yeah. It's so, I don't know, it's so electric. It's one of the most memorable parts of the whole movie. And honestly, there are a bunch of like really fun sequences in this movie.
Yeah.
It's a really like kinetic movie, which I didn't expect.
Yeah, they're great.
I remember being so bored by it when I was younger, and I don't understand why.
And again, I think it's part of that. And again, a lot of these things are much more vague that I'm just trying to put like words to.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that for me personally came from that kind of distance I feel from everything in the movie.
Interesting.
Like not even distance by being like, oh, I don't understand them emotionally. I'm saying like physical framing distance I feel from all of these characters. Even Hugo, when he's on screen, is so often framed in like a wide with only like part of him over here. Like it's just everything feels kind of, and you have this kind of cold blue digital or almost cold, even when it's like brass and warm colors.
Yeah.
Like everything is cold and digital and distant.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the film, and I mentioned this like right as the movie was starting, it looks like a French film. Like all of the French movies I've seen from like the 2000s pretty much look like Hugo, which is interesting.
Well, not only that, I think it looks quite a bit like The Aviator.
Well, I mean, it's the same cinematographer.
And it's the same era, and a lot of what makes The Aviator work is that it's specifically trying to kind of mess with your head while you're watching the movie. So much of The Aviator, especially on an editing level, is specifically like tripping you up and like putting you at this weird distance from the characters.
Yeah, I was about to say
Howard,
it's meant
Howard
to be
Hughes
very
is like a very like interesting protagonist.
It's meant to be very
follow.
Stilted and cold a lot of the time,
and that very much works for what they're going with. But I feel that kind of similar feeling to the way this is shot.
That's interesting. I don't know, because it's a lot
more kinetic.
Yeah,
and a lot
it's a
more
very lively
magical
movie. Yeah.
But it still kind of has that same digital blue over it.
It is a very blue movie, which you wouldn't expect. I don't know. I wouldn't expect, given like the general aesthetics of like a train station and like old film and old theaters and everything. Like I wouldn't expect it to be as blue as it is, but I think it really works. Like for me, I don't know. It wasn't a detractor for me. Like you get to see so much of the detail of environments and like the way they light everything.
Yeah, and the lighting's beautiful. And
the way they frame all the shots, which it is often like a wider shot, but when they do close-ups, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I don't know, I find myself connecting to the performances a lot.
I really like the performance. Yeah. Like I said, there's something just cinematically off-putting to me personally about this movie, and that's the best way I can really describe how I feel towards a lot of it. And I don't know why that is, especially like I'm a huge Scorsese fan.
Right.
He's my favorite
You're
director.
a much bigger fan of him than I am.
And I really like even a lot of the movies that a lot of people don't connect with. I really connect with a lot of his movies. I mean, again, The Aviator is like my favorite movie from him, and not a ton of people are like even a huge fan of it.
Yeah. Well, and this is the same guy who shot Bringing Out the Dead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's just so much like of his movies that I always attach to, even the ones that I'm not as big of a fan of, like even something like The Wolf of Wall Street has a super powerful, tangible message that I even got a lot emotionally out of, despite not liking to engage with a lot of what the movie was doing.
Yeah.
But I just don't get that from this. This is like one of the few movies from him that I feel like the least connected to.
Which is so strange.
Yeah, so strange,
because,
given
like,
a lot of the themes being around stuff that seems like they would connect to me the most.
Exactly. So much of this thematically and cinematically are like made to make you care about everything that it's putting down. Which again, I share like basically the same complaints about the movie as you do, just not to the same degree.
Yeah.
But like I don't know, it is very strange. But I don't know, like movies built around sentimentality like this are very hit or miss for me. Like I have to either connect with it or not. And there's a lot of movies like this that I admire more on a technical level, which this is kind of like that. Yeah. But again, like this viewing this time around, really, I found myself a lot more invested than I had been any other time I watched it.
Yeah, I get that. I have another question though.
Okay.
What do you think of a lot of like the more comedic moments and like a lot of our side characters and stuff around the platform and everything?
No, a lot of the special features we're talking about, like how they were going to structure the side plots and like the train station. I don't remember what the term for it is.
The station inspector.
Yeah, the inspector. Yeah. They were talking about how they wanted to like form those characters and like cultivate a really like nice atmosphere. And I love the romantic vignettes in this movie. They're so fun and sweet. And Scorsese described them as like anytime they were shooting one of those, he was like, it's basically like shooting a silent short film.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, exactly. And it's so great.
Yeah, and that's something that's really interesting because that's a great thing to mention because you get that sense through a lot of the movie, not even just these little vignettes of these characters, because you definitely do for them.
Yeah.
But a lot of the scenes in this
romances and everything.
I mean, obviously it makes sense that they would because it's about Méliès, but it feels like so many of them are like grabbing so much from the silent eras of film.
Absolutely.
And that's, again, really cool. And I really admire that and appreciate that. I was about to say, like, I absolutely love all of the platform stuff. I think the station inspector is hilarious.
Dude,
and really engaging to watch.
He's one of the most fun parts of this whole movie for me.
I love the two couples with the dachshunds. That's so fun. Like, all of it. And it does cultivate a really great sense of atmosphere. I would love to spend more time just on the platform, hanging out.
Yeah.
And I'll say this again. But I think, and that's another thing that plays into that feeling is you have these locations, but I feel like we're never really at that location. Like you get this great sense of atmosphere there, but again, you're always kind of from Hugo's perspective, where you're kind of very distant from it. I never, even when Hugo's at the clock shop, I never get a good sense that we're like in the station. We're not like we're there.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I think I get what you're saying. Like it's a lack of physical presence in the space. Like an almost like a weightlessness, but not that's not quite the right word.
Yeah, comparing it tone wise to something, and just because this is on the top of my head, like something like, and again, these are stylistically drastically different. But that's kind of the point. But comparing it to something like a lot of kind of the more atmospheric scenes from like the Before trilogy or something. And again, very, very like stylistically and written like very opposites of movies. But you're constantly just like, you have a lot of these scenes that are just kind of atmospheric things happening, little conversations with side characters and little vignettes of things. But all of them feel so intimate and personal and up close, and you feel a great sense of geography and like that you are down in these places with the characters.
Yeah.
And I never once feel like I'm actually in and down in the areas with these, which I feel like this should be such a theoretically cozy movie to watch.
Yeah. And part of me wants to kind of pin that on the 3D because it was shot for 3D. And they were talking about some of their process for like mapping out shots in 3D, that sort of thing. and how they would like kind of ramp it up during a lot of the more like comedic and action scenes, and then sort of bring it down to almost a minimum during a lot of the dramatic ones. Like Scorsese was talking a lot about like one of his favorite things about working in 3D was how it accentuated a lot of the smaller like performances, the way actors move their faces and everything. So it's interesting to me that like when you're talking about it, like that detail that Scorsese loved about 3D, when I'm watching it in 2D, that doesn't really come through in the same way.
Well,
And
it wasn't made for. It's not that kind of 3D. It wasn't made to ever be watched with like 3D glasses.
Well, it was shot for 3D.
Yeah, it was shot for 3D, and it was Scorsese specifically commented it was shot for 3D, but they specifically wanted it to be on a 2D format. So it was shot for 3D and then put to 2D, to where you have the 3D effects, but not actually requiring you to put on like.
Well, yeah, but like there are 3D versions of it that screened all like when it released.
Yeah.
What are you saying? Like,
I don't know. I was pretty sure I read that like it was like that wasn't the main intention of its release. Was
yeah,
the
no,
3D release like that.
No, it had a wide 3D. I didn't think it was like going in 2D mainly.
We didn't watch it in 3D when we watched it.
Well,
in
yeah,
theaters.
but like that was the intended way to see it, kind of like Avatar was. Like it was shot for 3D.
Maybe I'm misremembering what I read, but I was pretty sure it specifically said that they were shooting it for 3D, but like specifically like it was 3D but put to 2D as the main thing. But I don't know. I could you watched more of the special features.
Yeah, no, like they kept talking about how the 3D was like a big part of the viewing experience that they wanted. Like they wanted it to work visually in 2D as well. Like if you were to watch it without seeing it in a 3D format. But they were talking about how 3D was like, and that's a lot of what people praised about it was how well incorporated all of the 3D elements were. And they were going on about how it was like the first live action animal to be put in 3D, like on film. And it was funny. They were going on about like working on set with like dogs for the first time. Scorsese was like, the dachshunds are the worst actors I've ever had.
Dude, that's what truly makes it the best Scorsese movie. I take back everything I've said because it's the Scorsese movie to most prominently feature dogs, especially long-haired dachshunds.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe I should have. Maybe I just didn't find the thing that you did. But
yeah, I mean, I could be wrong. I didn't do that much
research. I don't know.
It
seemed like a lot of the critical reception and praise for it was based around the fact that the 3D was so well incorporated and visually, like so many of the elements gelled so well with it. Yeah,
no, I mean, but there's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong.
I don't know.
Like I was about to say, you can shoot for 3D and use 3D without actually having to view it in like a 3D glasses kind of sense.
But like, I mean, back then they screened it widely with 3D.
Yeah.
But like, he was actually talking about the history of 3D movies and how he collected like old 3D movie prints. Like he went and saw House of Wax. That was like the first movie he ever saw in 3D. And he was talking about the rise of 3D like as sort of a gimmick in that era, like back in the I think that's like late 70s and like into the 80s. But I don't know. It was really interesting, and you could tell that Scorsese really cared about it, and they kept talking about how well it was incorporated and wasn't just like a gimmick. How it added a lot of space and physical like occupancy to a lot of the images, which is why when you said like, oh, I don't ever feel like I'm there, I'm like, well, I wonder if we're doing it a bit of a disservice not seeing it in 3D, you know? Since it was crafted specifically for that. And I mean, obviously, I think it gels pretty well outside of that. Like just not watching it in 2D, it's a really striking movie with a lot of good composition and a good handling of how to like move around in a space, how to accentuate certain things with a good camera movement or a good push in. But yeah, I don't know. Since I don't remember if we saw it in 3D when we were younger.
No, we didn't.
We didn't?
No, I remember.
I'd be really interested to see it in 3D with how much it's been praised even by James Cameron, who I consider like the king of 3D movies.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he was even praised by him, I almost feel like I'm doing it a disservice not seeing it in 3D, because my opinion on Avatar, with how much I liked it, seeing it in 3D for the first time, it felt almost like a new thing, you know?
Yeah, but I don't know. Avatar is such a different space. I feel like 3D, and maybe we are doing it a disservice. I feel like 3D wouldn't change the specific things I'm talking about what make me feel distant from the movie.
Yeah,
because it's not like, I don't know, it does. I think even what we have does accentuate the performances really well. I do get really into all of the performances. I think
so
they're
well
fantastic.
lit, and the cast is so good.
The child actors do an outstanding job. Again, Hugo is really, really, like, I find his emotional, like, acting and the stuff with his dad really compelling.
Yeah, he's a great actor, man.
That's not what makes me feel distant. It's actually like the framing and the use of location work and visual effects, I think, that really make me feel like I'm just never quite there, that make me feel distant from the actual movie.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because like we're one of the generations that saw this that didn't grow up like seeing older movies. Like my main diet back when I saw it was like animated Disney movies from the 60s and 70s.
So old movies.
Right? Yeah, like old movies, but not like
not 60s and 70s.
Not like
we were watching like 40s, 50s, 60s.
Well, yeah, but like we didn't grow up with, or at least like we personally didn't grow up with a lot of live action movies. So a lot of the visual language in Hugo was very new to me back when I first saw it. And it kind of like took me out of it for a second. But I don't know. I feel like I really admire the way it composes itself, and I think it looks amazing. I think it has a lot of striking imagery, and it has a lot of like pretty direct visual homages to a lot of old silent films. But I wonder if there's just a disconnect in the language it chooses to use, since we're not as comfortable engaging with silent film, like geography and everything.
But I would disagree with it, because like every time I haven't watched a ton of silent films, but every time I have watched silent films, I've never felt that distant. I've felt really engaged at an emotional level with silent films.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there.
I think silent films and their language is often more emotionally expressive than a lot of modern movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't think that that's it.
No, well, I was just throwing it out there, since it does draw at least a little bit visually from old silent films. I
think at those points when it does very directly are some of the best, most engaging parts of the film.
Yeah, it makes for some really striking moments.
Even some of like the little vignettes and the inspector scenes are some of what I consider the best parts of the movie, and I think they're really engaging and funny and well shot and staged, and I don't know. It's just,
this whole movie is so well lit. I was just thinking back to that to the scene with the inspector and everything, and like his big shadow on the floor. It's so there's so many like fun shapes and different like textures we get to see throughout the movie, that it's just a really well made movie. Just thinking back on it, it's visually pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think, I do get what you're saying, and I do agree to a degree, but it's just not as big of a detractor for me.
Yeah, no, and it's not a huge, I mean, we rated it the same thing. It's obviously, it's not like I'm like, oh, it's pulling, the Hugo is a terrible movie, zero stars, it's bad. It's just a cold blob of disconnected.
I was about to say, the way you're describing it sounds like it's a very cold and distant movie with no like sentimentality that you actually connect with.
Like I said, I'm just trying to, and it's coming off kind of rambly and stuff, but I'm trying to put to words that feeling, that vague sense that I get while watching the movie that makes me feel like it's kind of disconnected from a lot of what the movie is doing.
No, and I get that. And again, that's the thing that kind of keeps me from loving it totally.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a vague thing that kind of
it's a vague feeling,
and it doesn't make the film bad. It doesn't make it like not even consistently funny or emotional.
Right? It's so funny. I forgot how like filled with jokes and like fun things it is.
Yeah, it doesn't take away any of that. It's literally just like this vague sense that kind of makes me feel pretty disconnected. And again, like I mentioned, among Scorsese's filmography, that's very unusual for me personally.
Interesting. Because I kind of get that vibe with trying to summon my Scorsese knowledge now. Not really to the same degree The Aviator, because I do like The Aviator and connect with it a bit more than Hugo. But I get a similar feeling with that film.
Thought you were gonna say The Departed.
No. The Departed, actually, I've grown to love a lot more than the first time I saw it. Shutter Island might be a good example of this, too. Again, same era, same cinematographer.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. There is a certain visual feel to it that I don't fully get into. Shutter Island, I think I just connect with a lot more on a like performance and script level than I do with Hugo. But I have kind of a similar feeling on a visual level.
Yeah.
Which is strange. I don't know. I wish I knew a bit more about cinematography so I could put a term to it.
Yeah.
But like for the moment, I'm just like, I don't know. It feels kind of weird, you know. But yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah. Did you have anything else specific that you wanted to mention?
I wanted to shout out the brilliant move to give the inspector a dog as his companion, because in the book he doesn't have one.
Oh yeah.
And it I don't know. It's such there's so many like just really fun and like purely good elements.
The inspector's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Just in general, there's so many good bits, like all of his phone stuff with the other guy.
Oh my god.
But there's specifically this one beat where like he's on the phone in the bath and he's like answering this like serious call, and then it like cuts to the side angle and he's in the bath with his dog. And it's just this really funny shot.
So
and
funny.
Again, that's really what I think that I've missed capturing about my opinion in this movie. Because I do really love so much of what it's doing. It's really funny consistently.
There's so many scenes that just bring me so much joy. But then again, like it comes back to like a scene that I don't connect with quite as much. Well, and it leaves me just a little cold.
It's not even that for me, because I connect with most scenes individually on their own. It's that kind of connective tissue between the scenes that is where you lose it for me, because I can think of any given scene in this movie and I like it.
Yeah.
And I think it's doing something. And usually I can emotionally connect with it in some way. But pairing them together into one film was where you kind of lose me in somewhat.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I get that though.
But I love a lot of the stylistic flares that the movie has, like when the big locked box opens up and you get some really cool effects of all the papers and everything. It gives the movie like almost that's something I wanted to compare it to, and I compared it to what we were watching is like kind of like Alfonso Cuarón's like Harry Potter.
Yeah, like Prisoners of Azkaban.
Like a very kind of magic captured in a cold sense, like it is in that movie.
Yeah, no, and visually, they are kind of similar. Again, Azkaban is a bit more bleak than Hugo is on a visual level.
Barely.
But wow, I don't know. There's a lot of warmth to be found in Hugo's like compositions. I don't know. I don't fully get your like coldness, because it is blue for sure, but
no, I just felt cold to the movie. Like I know there's a lot of on-screen warmth if you look at any given scene.
Again, it reminds me a lot of Del Toro's movies.
Yeah, like I mean, again, and I love Del Toro's movies, and I would describe them as very warm feeling, even in their coldness. And yet, I would describe Hugo as kind of a cold feeling movie, even in its warmth.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, any scene on, like, the platform is practically drenched in warm colors.
Right. Yeah, it has a nice golden glow to it. It's really nice.
It's a very artificial feeling golden glow.
Oh.
In my opinion.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. No, it's again, a more interesting, like, it's one of the most interesting pieces of Scorsese's career to me, like, in the way I interact with it, because it's something I watched when I was so young and just didn't like at all, really. And now I've kind of grown to enjoy it and appreciate it for all of its many, many merits, because technically it's a really impressive movie that I really admire. But I don't know. It's I don't know. It's a cool movie, and I'm glad I've finally revisited it, and I'm glad I own the Blu-ray.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
If I have kids someday, I will probably show them Hugo when I think they're old enough that it won't scare them or something.
Yeah, I don't really have too much personally more to add. I think it's a really beautiful, really well put together, really well acted, well shot, well directed movie that just doesn't fully work on every level. And again, most of what I said was just trying to describe in a vague sense why I felt that way.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's still really fun.
It's still a
and
technically
cute
amazing movie.
Technically, fantastic.
Yeah, no, that pretty much sums it up.
Again, I gave it a 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5. Really solid movie that I tend to respect more than I wholeheartedly adore. But
yeah, very much same.
Still very, very much respect.
Still probably to Yossi, like depressingly low on my Scorsese ranked. It's towards the bottom half.
Yeah, I still don't know if I would even put this above like Bringing Out the Dead.
No, I definitely wouldn't. Are you kidding?
Well, I'm trying to think of like low tier Scorsese, but like he's made so many great movies.
This only above 5 of his movies. It's above Boxcar Bertha, New York, New York, Mean Streets, Gangs of New York, and The Color of Money. It's sitting at number 17 out of the 22 that I have seen.
I could see putting it above Color of Money, but I just admire Color of Money's like aesthetics and like playfulness more than I do. Like I connect with it a bit more than I do to Hugo, so I don't know.
Yeah, above that I have like directly above that Wolf of Wall Street, The Departed, Cape Fear, Bringing Out the Dead, The Irishman, Casino.
Yeah. I don't know. Interesting. Very interesting to me personally. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about what we watched.
Let's do it.
Couple weeks.
Let's do it. All right, and that was Hugo.
That was Hugo.
we told lies. We're full of lies.
Full of lies.
Full of lies. We're recording this before the segment you just listened to. We listened to the basic facts, or we recorded the basic facts and then read this because we're going to go see Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning in like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So we won't be able to give our opinion on that on this episode, but for my sake, since I got to work, we're doing time thingies.
We're shuffling the recording. We're shooting out of sequence, Micah.
Yeah, plus we got 2 weeks of things to cover.
Yes, we do.
So anyway, for those of you who have never made it this far or are new to the podcast, the What We Watch segment is a little thing we do at the end where we talk about everything we've watched in between our episodes, give brief little ratings and thoughts, try and be brief and fun with it.
Yeah, just give you some recommendations if something we watch sounds interesting to you. That's that sort of thing.
Yeah, and we're going from the 29th.
Yeah.
And Ravi, what did we watch on the 29th?
On the 29th, we went out and we saw an early screening of the film Talk to Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, nobody's seen it. Well, a lot of people have seen it, but nobody's seen it yet.
Yeah. It's a horror film. Pretty cool by my standard.
Yeah.
It was fun going and seeing it in a theater for sure.
First time director brother duo, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
And it was cool seeing it early.
As a debut goes, pretty solid.
Yeah,
I would be proud of it.
Really, really fun stuff in this. Really, like the standout thing is that we were actually talking about it before we started recording, because that's just the thing you think of when you think about Talk to Me, is there's this montage in it towards the beginning of the film.
It's just that's just like montage,
the greatest montage you've ever seen. Like literally.
And it's set to music.
It's set to music and it's done, like the editing is fantastic and there's some really, really fun camera work in it. Yeah. And it's just like, I wish the whole movie had that energy, because that, like during that scene of the movie, I was like, yeah, I am pumped for the rest of this movie.
No, the first act of this movie is like one of the most memorable horror films I've seen in the
I
theater.
loved the first
so
act
great.
of this movie.
Yeah.
And really, like, thinking back on it, I've only grown more positive to a lot of the elements of it.
Interesting.
Really, the thing that's kind of weak about it is the thing that's weak about a lot of possession movies, especially in this one, because, like...
Yeah, it just really drags down
I was
my
about to say,
enjoyment
your
of it.
main character is the one, like, your point of view character is the one kind of getting haunted and possessed.
Yeah.
And, like, doesn't know it. So it really, like, messes with the actual story. So in the first act, you have these really strong character dynamics and you have really strong narrative momentum. And, like, after the whole possession stuff starts to take place,
they all get like isolated.
Yeah, it gets very isolated and you kind of lose all of the dynamics. And
you lose a lot of the energy that made the first bit of it so electric and fun to me.
Yeah, and it's still fine. In fact, there's some pretty, like, stellar imagery still.
Yeah, I really like the imagery in this movie.
Some squeamish stuff, which was cool.
Yeah, not every day a movie makes me, like, kind of squirm a little bit, you know?
And the cast is really, really fun.
Yeah, the cast is really fun.
Joe Bird.
Yeah,
Joe Bird. Half of these people are, like, first-time actors. Good old... Isn't it? This is an Australian film, correct?
Yeah, Australian.
Yeah. So, yeah. It's a cool film. I would definitely say go check it out in a theater.
I was about to say,
the movie.
If you're up for Talk to Me.
When it comes out, when does it come out?
I don't remember.
It comes out, I think, like in July.
Something like that, I believe.
So yeah, go check out Talk to Me when it comes out. I give it a 4 out of 5.
I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5. I do think it's good. It's just not quite together enough for me to be great movie.
It's definitely sloppy, but I'd still call it stronger than something like Smile, which I gave Smile a 3.5. If we're talking about like horror directorial debut films, which there have been so many recently.
Right?
The new Insidious movie, The Boogeyman.
Was Boogeyman a debut?
Smile.
That's crazy.
Talk to Me. Like horror. Juliet was talking on Twitter about like the fact that the new Insidious movie is doing really well. And she's like, horror is back.
Horror's back, baby. It really is. We're getting a lot of originals from first-time directors. It's pretty cool.
Like nobody else is giving original movies to first-time directors right now.
Yeah, Talk to Me. Cool movie.
Talk to Me. Then on the 30th, I watched Crossword Mysteries Proposing Murder.
Proposing Murder. Which Does someone like propose in the movie?
Yeah. Oh. Which is the sequel in the hit Hallmark series Crossword Mysteries. Yeah. This is the second entry.
It's like the glass onion to Crossword Mysteries. Knives Out.
It really is. Because it's very similar to the first one, but lacking a lot of the charm and consistency of the original, which wasn't there much in the first film.
I was about to say the first one isn't exactly like an indie darling or something. It's not some underground gem.
So it was very bad. I don't have too many thoughts, except for it's still so weird seeing Lacey Chambert, I think is how you say her name. Mean Girls girl.
Yeah, Gretchen Wieners.
Gretchen Wieners is a big Hallmark star, and it's so weird seeing her in these movies. But I gave it
pretty great.
I gave it a 1.5.
Nice. On the 30th, I watched Pixar's, not their latest film anymore, one of their newer films, though, Lightyear, which we did not go and see in the theater back when it came out. But I finally watched it on Disney+. I watched the IMAX enhanced version, Micah, which basically means when people are talking, it's cropped, and when there's stuff happening, it's IMAX. But it was fine. It makes me so disappointed because I like kind of wanted it to either be like, oh, this is actually pretty good, or just bad. But it's really just fine.
What about that hit ending, Ravi?
Dude, that honestly was the biggest turnoff for me, because like I was kind of into what it was doing. Like, it wasn't great, obviously, but I was kind of into what it was doing, and then the ending rolled around and I'm like, this is just really stupid. I'm sorry. This is just a really dumb direction to take the screenplay in, and I kind of enjoy the first half of it, but then it just kind of gets really boring and kind of dumb.
I think really like it got a lot of people just annoyed at Pixar more than anything, because like that's the movie that got a theatrical release when nobody was really jazzed about it, and like Luca and Turning Red were just like, I don't know.
Turning Red is like leagues better than this.
I would have killed to see Luca in a theater. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
That's such... I wish they'd bring it back. It's such a good summer movie.
But yeah, Lightyear, perfectly mediocre movie that wastes Bill Hader. Micah, Bill Hader is in there, He's only in there for like 1 minute. I'm like, where'd he go? Bring him back. But I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5. Not my thing.
Yeah, and since we're crunched on time, I'm going to be fast with some of mine.
All right.
On the first, I watched Black Mirror: Hated in the Nation, which was
continuing the Black Mirror.
Yeah, despite my biggest criticism of a lot of the early episodes being that they were too short, this one's too long.
It's too long,
and it doesn't justify its runtime nor balances its plot points very well. But it's still a fun concept, and it's got a cool mystery, so it's fine.
It's fine.
I gave it a 3 out of 5.
Fair enough.
Then what did we watch, Remy?
Then we went out to the theater and we watched Elemental in 3D.
Yeah, Elemental in Real D 3D.
It was pretty cool seeing it in 3D, honestly.
I'm really into the Real D 3D.
Yeah, it looks good, man. But
Elemental.
It's Elemental.
It was a pretty fun Pixar movie. I heard, like, obviously there's a lot of kind of meh feeling towards it, and I think honestly that's on a lot of the way it was advertised. Like, it just didn't get anybody interested.
It's a really sweet movie. I don't know.
Yeah, the advertising didn't sell to anybody.
I was not planning on actually seeing it in the theater, but we just on the like spur of the moment decided to go. So
yeah.
But it's cool. It's really ambitious in the way it's animated. Like I can't imagine trying to animate like these characters.
Every single frame has constant motion.
Has constant motion, and it has the two lead characters refract light and produce light, and they are constantly moving, and they do not maintain like a concrete shape. So it's very impressive to me from an animation standpoint.
Yeah, it's beautiful too, for the most part. There's some really cool moments that don't last very long in the cinematography. I would say the editing is not nearly as good as it could be.
Yeah.
The pacing of shots
it's a little shoddy, but it works. It's functional.
But yeah, I don't know. It's not the greatest thing, I think, in what they could have done with the immigrant story, which I think is a really cool like jumping off
That's
point.
one of the coolest things about the movie. Honestly.
It's relatively a better race allegory than anything else Pixar's done. But like
it's a lot more compelling anyway.
At the same time, it still doesn't feel like it's doing quite as much as it needs to, especially with its plot. Because not really much happens in the plot, which is fine if they didn't like ramp it up to 1 million in the last 5 minutes. They try and
fit a lot more threads than they needed to in there. They just needed to focus on like the family stuff, like the immigrant stuff, and then the romance, and that's all they needed to do.
But the characters are really likable. The animation is beautiful. So I really enjoyed it. Actually, I gave it a 3.5.
No, I really liked it too. I ended up giving it a 3. I think it's pretty good. I was surprised.
Then on the second, I watched The Wolf of Wall Street for the first time.
The Wolf of the Street.
He's a wolf, and he's out there on the wall. Street.
After all, you're my wonder wall, if you will.
A very weird Scorsese movie. Again, I've kind of powered through a bunch of his movies, especially recently.
Yeah.
And this one is definitely like a standout, but not in the way that I would think would make it like
it's a career best.
Well, not in the way that I would think would make it like such a mainstream hit. Mm-hmm. It's so weird to me that this out of all of his
everyone
movies
knows Wolf
is
of Wall
like
Street.
His movie that like your common Joe has probably seen or at least heard of.
Yeah.
I guess just because its content's so bad that it got a reputation for that, and it was in peak DiCaprio time.
I was about to say,
introduced Margot Robbie.
DiCaprio, Margot Robbie. It's just trashy enough that people were talking about it, and like it's just good enough that people were like recommending people to go watch it.
Honestly, out of his like 3-hour-long movies, this is, in my opinion, like his least engaging 3-hour movie.
Which is a shame. Which really strikes me as odd, given like what it's about and everything.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's very odd. As I've sat with it, I still will probably never watch it again. The content is way too much, and I would never suggest it to anyone.
Yeah.
But like as I've sat with it, it is genuinely doing something really cool and powerful with its themes, as you can imagine from a Scorsese movie. There's a lot of really powerful imagery, and the performances from all of the mains are really fantastic. Margot Robbie's great as always. Jonah Hill's really funny.
Yeah.
DiCaprio's pretty great. Like, it's a good movie, but it's definitely it's not my favorite, and its content is bad enough that I'll never probably watch it again.
Fair enough.
But I gave it a 4 out of 5. It was a good movie. It just wasn't a good movie.
It's kind of funny. On the second, I watched Godzilla. Or Gojira, depending on who you ask. But the 50s version, the Japanese one, it's very cool. It's very sad and scary. It kind of feels like a nightmare, which I didn't really expect. It's like almost, I don't know. It's just way scarier than I thought it would be. I know it's supposed to be scary, but like, my goodness, like the sound design and...
But Robbie, what it really needed was an American protagonist.
No.
To tie it all together.
I don't even know if I'm going to bother watching King of Monsters. It looks bad. But yeah, it was really good. Its effects are really amazing. It's got a really nice, like, well, not nice, but it's got a really like thoughtful screenplay. And great performances. It's a classic for a reason. I honestly went in with kind of low expectations just because I hadn't really seen a kaiju movie that I really love. But this would, if I were to pick one that I really liked, it would be this one. It's just really fantastic. Way better than I expected. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Good stuff.
Then on the 3rd, I rewatched After Sun with the director's commentary for a video I was working on, which is now out on my YouTube channel. Ooh, hoo, hoo. I give it a 5 out of 5. It's amazing.
It's a great movie, man.
Also on the 3rd, I watched Black Mirror, USS Callister.
Whoa.
Another one of the episodes you hear a lot of people talking about. And you know what? It was really good. It was really fun. It's a solid, it's a solid movie, essentially.
Solid A tier Black Mirror.
Solid A tier. It's no S tier Black Mirror. I didn't get very emotionally invested into it, and I feel like Robert Daly, like despite being a really awful guy, he doesn't quite bring in any of the emotional.
Enough.
Yeah, he's not compelling. Yeah. He doesn't bring any of the emotional weight that you'd think. Like you don't have any real reason for why he like really wants to torture all of his coworkers. So like losing that kind of piece, which again I would say is largely due to its runtime, it doesn't really have the time to give him much character while also balancing the actual plot. Makes it a little weaker than it could be from an emotional level.
That's a shame.
But it's still really fun, and it's definitely one of the most unique and like really quality feeling episodes from the show.
Cool.
I give it a 4.5 out of 5.
Jesse Plemons.
Then on the 3rd, what did we go do, Robbie?
We went out to the theater yet again. So many theatrical visits this
Crazy
week.
What AMC A-List will do for you.
I was about to say the AMC A-List lifestyle. We watched Past Lives.
Yeah, one of the best of the year.
From Celine Song.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Isn't it her
debut?
Yeah, her feature-length debut. Very cool.
Very good movie.
A very, very good movie. I absolutely loved it.
One of the best of the year, man.
Fantastic. There's so much that you can't even get on a first watch. I really want to rewatch it.
Dude, I can't wait to rewatch it.
You're kind of like absorbing it all on a first watch, and like there's a lot going on. But man, it's such a sweet and like tragic and melancholy movie with like a great message.
It's really poetic, man.
It's really poetic and effectively delivered.
Yeah.
Like it really, like the closest thing I could even relate it to is something like Before Midnight in terms of kind of the feeling it has around it, which is very interesting. But the performances are outstanding. I loved the 3 leads.
They're so good, man.
They're, really engaging, especially Greta Lee.
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
Dude.
Which I know she's getting like more roles.
Yeah.
She's got the voice acting roles for Spider-Verse. And now she's got this. So I'm hoping like we'll get the more roles.
Get a career going here.
Well, she's got a pretty
she does
prolific career, just not in a bunch of movies.
Just not as like an A-list star or anything, you know.
So yeah, I can't even go into it all. The cinematography is fantastic, editing fantastic, score fantastic, writing fantastic, direction fantastic.
It's a wonderful film. One of the best I've seen this year.
It's really pleasant yet sad.
Yeah. I gave it a 4 out of 5.
I gave it a 5 out of 5.
Go watch it in the theater if you can.
Go watch it in the theater. Yeah. That's a command.
Very nice.
Then also on the 3rd, I watched Black Mirror Archangel. Which I think... No, I guess USS Callister started me on that season. Archangel. But my sister really likes... My sister really likes Archangel, so I was looking forward to it. But then I found out afterwards that actually, like, it's not a generally well-loved episode, and I can kind of see why. Like, most people think it's fine, just kind of mediocre.
Yeah.
It's actually directed by Jodie Foster, which is very interesting.
Jodie Foster.
The Jodie Foster. Very odd. But it's just kind of bland in most aspects. It doesn't use its own premise very well. Its characters aren't that compelling. It's not doing that much interesting plot-wise. It's just, it's fine. Like, it's got a interesting idea and premise behind it. The Archangel system is really cool, and you could do something cool with it, but it's just doing, like, the bare minimum on all fronts of what it could be doing. Which makes it still good, especially, like, and that's the nice thing about Black Mirror, is when they're kind of weaker episodes, because it's usually confined to, like, an hour or, like, an hour and 20 minutes.
You don't have to suffer for that long.
It usually helps it a lot by being kind of brief.
Yeah.
So I still gave it a 3 out of 5.
Fair enough. All right. On the 4th, I watched Anatomy of a Murder for the first time.
Gotta anatomize the murder.
It was my 3rd Otto Preminger film, and probably my favorite of his, honestly. I mean, Jimmy Stewart is just like one of the best actors ever, probably. And having him be the lead of this is doing wonders, man. It's a really smartly written movie. It kind of takes place in like 2 halves, and they're both like equally interesting. So it was really cool. I'm glad I own the Criterion Blu-ray of it.
I saw the last like hour, and Jimmy Stewart was fun.
He's so good, man. I gave it a 4 out of 5.
Then also on the 4th, we watched Predator for the first time.
Predator.
Very interesting. It's very fun. The camera is a lot more dynamic than I thought it would be. And the performances
Some fun camera work,
are so 80s and goofy, and the action is so 80s, and everything about it is so 80s.
Extremely
that, like,
80s.
You can't help but just kind of admire what it's doing.
You bask in the 80s-ness of it all.
So I enjoyed it. It's not the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, there's a few things holding me back from like loving it, but I really do admire a lot of what its screenplay does, and like just the genre marrying of like action movie, tactical alien slasher movie. Like that's such a cool mix of genre, and it really works. Good stuff.
I gave it a 4 out of 5.
Great effects too.
Yeah, the effects are really cool for the time.
4 out of 5 also for me.
Then on the 6th, I rewatched After Sun. Gave it a 5 out of 5 again. Still working on my video.
On the 5th, I watched.
Darn it.
Oh yeah, you skipped my movie.
Hurry up, Robbie.
I know, I'm going. I watched The Awful Truth, a Leo McCrory romance comedy, I guess. It's kind of a rom-com, sort of. It's got Cary Grant in it. It's one of his earlier roles. It's fun. It's fine. Pretty good, but not anything that I'm like dying to rewatch, you know. He kind of blows his performance, like this performance, out of the water the next year in Bringing Up Baby, so go watch that instead. Awful Truth, I give it a 3 out of 5. Not my favorite, but not bad by any stretch.
Then on the 6th as well, I watched Black Mirror Crocodile, which I felt like pretty similarly. Like it's fine. Yeah. It's kind of weird, kind of weak, but still pretty enjoyable. I don't know. It just doesn't really fully work, I think, with the concept, and doesn't feel fully justified in the actions. But the guinea pig thing was funny, so
like it's like funny. I like it. Thumbs up.
I gave it a 3 out of 5.
It's a barrel of laughs. On the 6th, I sat down and watched The Lady Eve for the first time, which is I think my second Preston Sturges movie. Which he did Sullivan's Travels, which me and Michael were both pretty big fans of. And this is honestly probably just a teensy bit worse. They're about on the same level, and it's just a joy to watch, man. For the first hour or so, it's like the most romantic, like sentimental movie ever, and also is really funny. And then it just kind of, it devolves a little after that. Like, it's still really enjoyable, but it doesn't have the same magic after the first act or so. Which was a shame, but I really enjoyed it. Obviously a very big influence for Peter Bogdanovich's What's Up, Doc, which I'm a big fan of. So
very good movie.
This is like a precursor to that, so of course I loved it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Great movie.
Then also on the 6th, lots of things on the 6th, we watched The Color of Money, Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
Topical.
Great stuff, man.
Very interesting movie. It's really unique among his movies. Paul Newman and Tom Cruise are really fun in it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I fully didn't really get what it was going for, maybe because I haven't seen The Hustler.
We got to watch The Hustler now.
So there's so many weird elements to its screenplay and its character dynamics.
No, that's really the biggest thing, is like the screenplay is just kind of oddly structured and like it's weirdly plotted. I don't know. like, technically, I think it's one of my favorite of Scorsese's movies. Like, it's electric and great and really fun to watch.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and it's got a great cast. But like the story is where it kind of loses me a little. But it's still really good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I loved it.
I loved seeing Tom Cruise with like his hair being just as tall as his forehead for the entire movie. That was good.
Tom Cruise is crazy in this. I gave it a 4 out of 5.
I also gave it a 4 out of 5. Visual masterclass, my man. Great
outstanding.
stuff.
On the 7th, I watched The Last Temptation of Christ.
Temptation.
Another Martin Scorsese. Just bought the Criterion for the sale.
Willem Dafoe.
First time seeing it, and I was skeptical because I don't know. I grew up a Christian, still a Christian.
Yeah.
Like grew up in that sphere, and anytime I had heard anyone talk about The Last Temptation of Christ, it was like, oh, you can't watch that one. But I don't know. I watched it, and I thought what it was doing was really tactful and smart and really spiritually powerful. And I genuinely, absolutely adored it. I think it's one of Scorsese's honestly best on a technical level. Willem Dafoe and Harvey Keitel are giving outstanding performances. They're super memorable. And I've nonstop been thinking about it since I've watched it. It's one of my favorite, like, religious films now. And I think despite maybe some of its content not being what a lot of people wanted to see, I think it is very, very good, very, very powerful, and not, like, I don't know, sacrilegious. It's pretty tactful with what it's doing, and very clearly telling you that it's not based on the Gospels.
I'm very interested to watch it at some point after you've kind of raved about it.
Yeah,
you know?
I kind of adored it,
Yeah.
so I gave it a 5 out of 5.
Very cool.
Then on the 7th, Rebby, what did we watch?
We watched John Carpenter's Dark Star.
Dan O'Bannon.
Dan O'Bannon, baby.
Written in by John Carpenter and Dan O'Bannon.
Yeah.
Production design by Dan O'Bannon.
The film school days.
Dan O'Bannon is in it.
He's great, man. It's a sci-fi satire for those unaware.
Dan O'Bannon should have been a comedy actor.
He should have been a comedic actor. He's really
so
great.
Funny.
But it's got Dark Star has such a great spirit, and like it's so funny and like surprisingly smart about how it goes about a lot of its satire. I don't know. It really, if you fixed like some of the weird plot padding that it has, like it pads out the runtime quite a bit, I think you'd have like a pretty stellar movie on your hands.
It's really fantastic.
It's really fun.
There's some great comedic bits,
There's
some really
great
fun visual stuff,
man.
Deliveries, all sorts of
Yeah,
stuff.
the VFX look great.
But yeah, it's
Good
just
stuff.
a little too long. Is really the big
bit
thing.
Too long.
So it doesn't fully, and it's just not fully my cup of tea, but it's so fun.
It's so fun, dude. I can see why it's become such like a cult classic. It's great.
I gave it a 3.5 out of 5.
I give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's really solid.
Then on the 8th, I headed out to the theater again and saw Insidious the Red Door. I've only seen the first Insidious movie, but I watched Insidious 5.
We did an episode about Insidious if you want to go listen to it.
Yeah, in fact, that episode features my girlfriend, of which I went and saw this movie with.
What?
Patrick Wilson's directorial debut.
Shout out Patrick Wilson.
It's kind of goofy. It's kind of poorly written in the fact, like conceived in the fact that most of the plot is people trying to figure out if the plot of the first two movies happened, which your audience knows the plot of the first two movies happened, so it just doesn't make for very compelling thing to watch.
Right.
But it's still fun, and it's sufficiently spooky, and it's a pretty big crowd pleaser, I think, from my pretty packed theater. Loved it.
Yeah, you said the reactions were like people were really into it.
Yeah, so it was fun. What can I say? I liked seeing adult Ty Simpkins. He was fun.
Ty Simpkins is pretty fun. Yeah.
I gave it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, and then we sat down and we rewatched
Hugo. And you just heard all about it.
You just heard all about it.
And we got to go. We got to go see Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1.
I'm grabbing my keys, grabbing my wallet.
Thanks for listening. See you guys next time.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Wiser and more enriched by Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Bye.
Bye.